You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Good evening and welcome to a special tropical weather bulletin earlier than the usual time, and that's because we're running for a 2-hour period this evening, as it is our time over here on the Universal Clock. Of course, we're dealing with many things that are going on across the Pacific Ocean, east and west. So time zones will get a little bit confusing at times because it's still afternoon where Felicia is, and that's what we're looking at right now. There it is. Category 3 now, starting to weaken, 125 miles per hour. In the Western Pacific, Tropical Storm Infa and 10W expected to get a name soon. Over there, of course, it's early in the morning. And who can forget Tropical Storm Guillermo in the eastern part of the East Pacific, which is moving towards either Clarion and then moving out behind Felicia, basically, following its track a little bit further north. And to talk about everything that's going on, and there is a big list of things that are going on, I'm trying to get all the imagery to show you as well. My name is Nathan Foy, and I'm joined by our team at this moment in time, consisting of Christian, Xavier, and Z. Good evening to all of you.
Good evening.
Hello.
Good evening.
Where on earth do we begin? Do we begin with the storm that we've been looking at for the most in the last few days, which is Felicia? I guess we will, just to kick things off, after its massive peak yesterday, borderline Category 5. Who knows what the actual intensity is going to come out as on the reanalysis after that one's done. That'll be scratching a few people's heads. But right now, starting to degenerate Category 3, and the elements are starting to stack up against it.
Yep, that's...
Yeah.
We've been dealing with a pretty annular structure in terms of what Felicia's been looking like the last few days. That eye has been completely dry, and of course that eye was just really noticeable, but over the last 12 to 18 hours, we've really just seen it gone away, and it's really not invisible anymore, so we're really starting to see the final downfall, and this is likely that this is not going to be coming back from that, and it's pretty much just on a weakening trend from now on.
It's just broken on me, so now we're looking at imagery of Infa, not to confuse anyone. This is the latest imagery on what I would have gone to next, and this is the upcoming significant typhoon threat by the looks of things, intensifying right now. A rather curious storm because it's pretty large. The pressure's starting to go down. At the moment, I think we've still got it at 50 miles per hour.
Let me check, because we have, of course, our cyclone analysts that help us and make our fixes. As of 21Z, which would be 2 hours ago, we had it at 50 miles an hour with a pressure of 991 millibars.
Which I find interesting because, I don't know, it seems to me like that pressure might be a bit high. But I don't know. Right near the Daito Islands, the smaller islands to the south, actually, I think are, I'm not sure if they're just reefs, but Daito-jima is to its north by about 50 miles or so. And I imagine they have some equipment on the ground, so I don't know if we've looked into any of those ground observations, just to see if there's any winds getting up. I assume they'll be getting tropical storm force winds, but mainly to do with this, it's the forecast ahead of it. We're talking about the southern Ryukyu Islands could get a substantial typhoon impact, and for northern Taiwan and the eastern coast of China. You were just looking, Xavier, I think, at the CDPS for this storm before we went to air. Either you or Christian, I can't remember who was looking at it now. Do you want to talk about that?
Sorry, I've lost track.
For
Info,
for Infa, yes.
but info. Yes. Give me one moment. It was just calculated. Oh, yes. Stage 6 for info for Maya Kojima, I believe. Um, Looking by what I'm seeing here, we've got a wind speed of just over major, storm size of significant to major. Sorry, wind speed of just over significant, excuse me. Storm
Hmm.
size of significant to major, rainfall potential major to extreme, overall threat is just over significant. So stage 6 overall.
Oh, it looks like it's going to have a massive wind field here on this JTWC forecast map. See?
Yeah, it's Taipei, which is the most Taipei, which is Taiwan's capital. It will be affected by at least 50 knot winds, including its most populated city, New Taipei. Uh, Hurricane winds is possible by its decrease in size from 10Z 2218Z down towards 2318Z from 85 knots to 75 knots.
Yep, and you can see the forecast track quite clearly there. Of course, there is an enormous cone that always comes with that, and a big spread, and quite a bit of uncertainty about exactly where the center of this storm is going to track, especially when you get towards the end of the 5 day period. But you are talking about very large populations that could be affected by this. At the moment, in the 10% chance for tropical storm force winds, I believe it's about 14 million. Now that's in the next 5 days, and as the 5 day cone creeps further over into China, that number will increase. I believe we're also joined by Noah at this point, and we're just going to switch over to the infrared view of the Western Pacific, showing both Infa and 10W. Which one would you like to talk about, Noah?
Well, it looks like Tropical Storm Infa could become a significant typhoon. I'm just currently looking at the current GFS, and it takes the storm all the way down to the 930s in millibar and goes just north of Taiwan. So it could be a significant threat for both China and Taiwan. And we have seen throughout the last few days a very significant ensemble signal for this tropical cyclone. So pretty well forecasted so far.
This is what I find interesting about the GFS model, though. Calling 933 at peak in pressure, but as it initializes and goes to the 6 hour phase, which is basically now 0Z, it already has it at 973, and yet we're running with 991. So is the GFS completely over egging the intensification phase?
Knowing the GFS, probably.
Oh no. The latest forecast calling for 930 at peak now, which it's been hovering around that the whole time. What it has been consistent on is that the intensification phase would be pretty quick, and it would be starting around now. So I guess that's going to be pretty key. So let's talk about Tropical Storm 10W. We're just going to go through all of these in turn, really, and then we'll take a look at and see where we end up with our conversation and our questions. Of course, you can send in your questions, which we'll start taking soon. Start your message with Force 13 all in text in the chat. So 10W on the satellite imagery, looking a bit messy, but from what
Yeah.
I've heard, radar is saying something different.
Uh, I haven't checked radar personally, but I do know we do have
It went by
CDPS.
really quickly, and I don't know if I didn't even look at it properly myself because the conversation flow in our chat. But I say that because I'm sure we're watching this very closely because in that area, small systems like that can intensify rapidly. and unexpectedly. At the moment, as you can see on our cone again, the JTWC cone there being shown by Z, forecasting a peak of, what's that, 55 knots. So making landfall with winds of about 100 kilometers per hour sustained, 60 to 65 miles per hour. Moving inland and then becoming a tropical storm again as it exits off Hainan Island, so it might have another phase. So
Yeah, we do also have CDPS for 10W as well.
yeah,
Would you like me to read that out?
of course.
Okay, so it's similar to Infa, but there's a few differences. Just please bear with. Wind speed of just over significant, storm size moderate to significant, rainfall potential major to extreme, overall threat to land is significant, and the overall rating is stage 4 for let's see if I can pronounce this right. Yangjian in China. Obviously, I'm not good with Chinese names. I do apologize if I butchered the pronunciation.
Just checking the latest GFS run as well, just to add a little bit more uncertainty. That it will be an uncertain track. I mean, you look at the massive cone from the JTWC. We know they're large anyway, but it's literally a
Oh
big,
my
massive
goodness.
circle. The GFS does take it west of that peninsula. I always forget the name of that peninsula. Into the Gulf of Tonkin, and then onto the western coast of Hainan Island. So that's something to look out for. And there's an infrared loop by the looks of things as well. We can actually
Nathan,
go ahead.
yeah, that might interest you. I've put in live output a microwave image of 10W that shows it has formed at least a partial inner core.
Right, yes, I think this is what some of our other people were getting at earlier on. What does this suggest?
Well, it suggests that below the pretty messy and monsoonal structure of the tropical cyclone it shows on infrared satellite, there actually might be a much more organized tropical cyclone. This pretty much shows there's an inner core that's pretty large and probably still messy, but still it's more organized than you would expect with this monsoonal satellite appearance.
It certainly looks that way. We're just going to try and get some of our imagery will be slow to load here. Here we have it now. Just to point out that the first visibles are appearing over 10W. They've been over Infa for a little while. We'll look at that in a moment. But what can we make of this visible imagery? It looks like there's some decent rotation when you look at it in the loop. So certainly suggests that something's going on down there. Looks better animated actually than looking at the well, no, I think that the image was animated, wasn't it? But for some reason this view here looks better to me. Let's take a look at this particular imagery for Infa as well. First time loading it on the stream, so it'll be a bit slow to load. It'll be quicker next time. So whilst we wait for that, let's see if we can take a look at one or two questions perhaps. Start your message with 413 all in text. What is Felicia's wind speed now? Well, our analyst team have gone with 125 miles per hour, a pressure of 947. NHC's latest update has 120 miles per hour and a pressure right up at 961, which is interesting.
You're a little off on the estimate that we have from the analyst there.
What is it now?
We have 125 miles an hour at 955 millibars.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, 955. It was 947 before that, and now up to 955. And moving still west-northwest at 12 miles per hour according to the National Hurricane Center. Looking back now at the visible imagery on Infa in front of us on the screen, and you can see that core building perhaps, and just a very large outflow by the looks of things.
Yeah.
Why is there a substantial gap to its south just there?
You mean this dry slot between the band and the centralized convection?
So that's a major dry slot, is it?
Um, I think it's just because the tropical cyclone is not that mature already, but to me it looks pretty healthy with this massive outflow to especially to the east and this curved band structure that's usually suggesting that it could intensify quite a lot
Absolutely.
in the next few hours.
And that indeed is what the models are suggesting. Do you think it could get all the way towards a big cloud top, eye wall structure with quite a deep eye, which is what some of the model infrared projections were showing?
Well, of course, the I looked at the models for not the longest time, but what I saw is a pretty favorable environment in the upper levels. And I guess sea surface temperatures in that part of the world are also very high. So yeah,
Yeah,
the
well,
upper level pattern looks very favorable. Um, so it could rapidly intensify and become a pretty intense typhoon.
and we have been talking on previous tropical weather bulletins. We're always talking about how warm the sea surface temperatures are, stretching right up to Kyushu now in Japan, really. Very warm temperatures. There's a little cool slot, I believe, still just off the east coast of China, so it would most likely be weakening by the time it makes landfall. I mean, well, it ought to if it's going to go close to Taiwan as well. That would knock the stuffing out of the storm too. So that's something to look for. Let's see if we've got some more questions just now. I know we're jumping around quite a lot because that's what happens when there's 4 storms to track. I'm not sure when the last time would have been when we were doing live coverage on 4 storms at a time. Probably a while. Okay, so a question here. What does Felicia rank for the smallest category 4? Well, that's something I don't know the answer to offhand. One
Yeah.
day our database will be so substantial that we'll have the answer for you in seconds, but that's probably about a few decades away.
Well, I can tell you that it is at least the second smallest Category 5 because I don't know how it compares in size to the 1989 cyclone Gay near India that was extremely small and probably Category 5. But by our analysis, it has been a Category 5, not the official analysis. So by our analysis, it is at least the second smallest Category 5 at some point in its lifetime. Even way smaller than Andrew.
That's, of course, if it was a Category 5.
Yeah, I mean,
I personally
some
have
of our
my doubts, I gotta say, but we'll all be looking back on it pretty soon.
yeah, just gotta wait for the reanalysis team, I reckon.
Yeah, the one interesting thing about Felicia is that you really only had tropical storm force winds extending at most up to 45 miles away from the center. And if you look at the grand scheme of things, that's definitely not much, especially when you're looking at a tropical storm, especially when you look at the other 3 storms that we have right now. I mean, 10W is relatively small as well, but when you compare it to, say, Guillermo or Infa, I remember doing the update on Infa last night. I remember the Eastern Quadrant was nearly 3 times as large as the wind radii for Felicia. So just to put things into perspective there with the other storms that we got right now.
It's pretty insane. Let's take another look at the Eastern Pacific. This is a geocolor imagery. So Felicia moving way off now towards the Central Pacific is about to cross 130 degrees west. 140 degrees is the dividing barrier for the Central Pacific. Towards the right looks like a Guillermo that's maybe struggling a little bit there. Is it being sheared off?
Let's see here.
Just
I know
my
it's been having
observation.
some
I
of
know
the...
you're all jumping around between satellites as well.
Yeah.
Looking for it.
Yeah, convection hasn't been as good as it was. Although it does appear that it has been, of course, dealing with shear issues, which was actually what the National Hurricane Center was noting, and why it won't be as strengthening as fast as it was. Although I must say that the National Hurricane Center definitely has been interesting in terms of the advisories with the storm, consistently giving attitudes to Felicia there, with of course the recent one being feisty. And then, of course, with Guillermo, they're really just using Daft Punk references, unfortunately. But in terms of what we're looking for with Guillermo's forecast, at least in terms of what it's supposed to do, it's definitely not going to be something worth noting in terms of the fact that we already have 3 other storms that have been proven to be much more notable,
Yeah.
especially the Western Pacific, which will make their more notable status as we head into the next few days, of course, especially with Infa and 10W. What we're looking at is the fact that Guillermo is highly asymmetric. It's broad in general, and within the next 24 to 36 hours, it's going to be moving into cold waters, and that's really not going to help it at all. And then once you get into day 3 and 4, you're getting a more dry air mass, so it's just going to be hit after another as we head into the later days of Guillermo's life, for sure.
Yeah, if I'm being honest, it looks so.
Absolutely, yeah.
If I'm being honest, Guillermo, or how it's pronounced, it looks pretty bad right now. It has an exposed low-level center. There's not much convection. It already looks like it's like in 24, 25 degrees Celsius sea surface temperatures. So I don't see how this will intensify in any way. If it, yeah.
Yeah, for those who's asking whether Guillermo will become a hurricane, it's probably not, unless it surprises as much as Felicia did, which seems to be extremely
It
doubtful given the
does
position of
happen.
this. It does happen. I'm just saying.
It does happen, indeed, yes.
As long as nothing surprises us, it is definitely not likely that Guillermo will strengthen into a hurricane. It does not have much time to strengthen.
I mean, National Hurricane Center has it at 55 knots.
Yeah, they
for
have that in 12
three-
hours and then staying there.
For 3 forecast periods, and Felicia's first forecast was for 55 knot peak.
Well, I mean, that was more towards the end of the forecast that they had it towards that 65-mile-an-hour thing. With Guillermo, the National Hurricane Center has always been towards the high end of the guidance, as most of the multi-model diagnostics want this thing to start weakening within the next 24 hours at most. And really, it's just National Hurricane Center trying to remain aggressive with this, given how much it did actually improve despite its broad signature earlier. Doesn't
Yeah.
look like that's appearing to be the case right now, though, especially with the fact that it does seem that it is dealing with an exposed level of circulation.
Well, you've got to put yourself back in the real world and look on the ground there and how it's pretty sheared and honestly doesn't look very good and doesn't look like it has much of a future. Interesting about the Eastern Pacific is that for years and years the National Hurricane Center have been producing updates there, and it's not their fault, but in my opinion at least, I think the Eastern Pacific is the most difficult place to forecast storm intensities because they can rapidly intensify out of nowhere, and do anything. They had storms like Felicia that were only expected to be a tropical storm, became a Cat 4 in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and here we are in 2021. It's still happening.
Yeah.
But there we have it. We had another question about, is there a slight chance that 10W could get named by Pegasa?
Unlikely.
I can't remember where the western extent is.
Pegasa have their own naming list for
Well, to-
the Philippine region.
To be fair, it actually is entirely possible, just if it survives the next 5 days, because we're looking at the next 5
When it
days.
moves east, yeah.
Yeah, because models have been trying to take it, once it's done with the Hainan Peninsula, it's expected to re-strengthen back into South China Sea, and then we could be seeing it go towards Taiwan. Now, Taiwan, or the Luzon Straits, are in that Philippine area of responsibility, so if it does survive and track into that region, then it would still receive that name.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's actually more than just a little bit of a chance. As long as this does as forecast, And as long as the models, which have pretty much either been shifting north or south, although they've been shifting more towards the north lately because they did have going to the Luzon Straits, but now they have it going into Taiwan, which would not be good given the fact that, you know, Taiwan is already getting hit with the Category 2 from Infa as of the current forecast. So definitely not good if they're going to be getting hit by two things. So Taiwan might be having to watch for a double threat there.
Absolutely. I mean, they're currently in the current for Infa, and as you're mentioning, 10W could have impacts, but that remains to be seen.
Yeah, the more direct threat and the more direct thing potential to be watching for if you are in Taiwan watching us right now is definitely Infa. That is going to be more of the serious threat given the fact that we are looking at what could potentially be a direct strike. That is definitely in the cards given the fact the cone is so large it could pass north, it could pass south, or it could just directly hit somewhere on the island. It's just very uncertain right now given the cone is just so massive. And keep in mind, the cone is the location of where the center of the storm could strike, and we are looking at, as what Nathan said earlier, a very large wind field. So it definitely seems that impacts will be felt somewhere in Taiwan. It's just a matter of how widespread and how significant will be based on that track that it does take.
And once again, there it is on the screen, the forecast track for Infa, which is going to be the biggest storm. It's currently the one that has the highest impact factor on our operations status. So it's something that we're going to be watching very closely over the next few days, and it's probably something that we'll be doing heavy coverage on when it moves through the islands of Japan and then on to Taiwan and China. Big populations impacted potentially.
Yeah, for sure. It's like you can look on satellite and just see how massive that inflow is. It all the way goes through the Philippine Sea and even into parts just north of the Philippines. That inflow is still coming from going into Infa there. So it's definitely gotten a very impressive inflow there, even with its very large size. So definitely something that's going to be worth noting and watching as we head into the next few days as it makes that leftward turn, which it's already started doing.
Just try and reposition this a little bit so you can just get the full view of the tail there. Look at that. So a very broad influence from this storm with cloudiness associated with it extending pretty much all the way round to Luzon and then starting to interact with 10W. You could draw a line there, a little bit tenuous, but you can see that potential linkage. A question, could 10W become a typhoon before landfall? I think so.
Yeah, there will be a cone that's going to be coming out, and of course Christian will be taking the video update that we will be having go out in an hour and a half or so on 10W, and given the fact that it is really looking very impressive on radar, a radar eye was actually confirmed, so we are seeing an eye wall potentially develop with 10W. It does seem pretty likely we will be seeing a typhoon out of this. In fact, we are going slightly above what you would typically expect from agencies with how close to land it is. We are going with 90 miles an hour on the forecast cone that is being made, based on the fact that there is definitely signs that we could be seeing some rapid intensification out of this.
Gosh.
A little bit of an appendix here. Taipei, Keelung, Taoyuan metropolitan area is around 9,257,000 people. So Infa will be at least a population risk for Taiwan.
Absolutely. It would be a safe assumption from a preparative point of view that the whole top half of Taiwan will get tropical storm force winds. There was a second part to that question, by the way. Can Fabian become a Category 3 plus equivalent storm before landfall? And what impacts would be felt from the two storms? Fabian is Infa, right?
Yeah, Fabian is the Philippine name that was given to the storm. And I believe it's pronounced Fabian, unlike the Atlantic in 2003, which was pronounced Fabian, I believe so. Philippines have their own ways of pronouncing things, as we have of course seen, and we will be trying to respect that, of course. Fabian, I've been trying to look at what that has potential for. It's going to be in a moderate shear environment for a lot of its life, although it does really cool down as it gets towards day 4, and where the shear drops to low amounts. There's not really models that are pointing out towards Category 3 status, except for the H-Wharf model, which we have seen go a little bit high on tropical cyclones in this region before. In my opinion, I think a mid-range Category 2 is definitely the best bet, given the fact that that has been the intensity most models have been consistent on, and the best idea of what conditions would allow for. The sea surface temperatures are going to be staying pretty good. You're still going to be sticking with 28 degrees Celsius or further. And then, of course, in terms of relative humidity, you're still looking at 60% or higher throughout its entire lifespan. So it's got some good traits going for it. It's just that shear is going to be the biggest issue in terms of how much it's strengthened, as well as its large size.
That's just fascinating.
Usually with large size, you typically see tropical systems not strengthen as fast because, of course, you got a lot more working for it. So it's really much going to be its shear and its size that become the big players in how strong Infa/Fabian will become.
It's fascinating that, given the pressure will rapidly decrease most likely, and it will probably only get to Category 2, maybe 3 status at most. Say the GFS was right and it got down to 930 millibars and only a Category 2 or 3, like, oh my goodness, that would be a huge storm that would allow that to happen. And regardless of wind speed, impacts across land, you're talking about something really major there.
Yeah, unfortunately, my biggest takeaway, if you are watching from Taiwan and the Okinawa Islands as well, really got to be paying attention. If you are not close to the cone of uncertainty, that doesn't mean you're not going to get impacted. If you're far away, it doesn't mean you're not going to get impacted. This storm is going to be pretty large. And yeah, I'm looking at the 18Z run, and you're seeing while they go north of the island, pretty much the entire island of Taiwan is still getting impacted, whether it's rain or just the full brunt of the system in general. And that's what really has me concerned at the moment. The fact that this is just going to be an extremely large system, and it's just going to be extremely widespread in its impacts, whether it's the rainfall or whether this takes that unfortunate direct pass towards Taiwan, and we end up seeing those significant conditions going on there.
But I mean, currently it has a large, greater influence with this curved band and the great outflow on the eastern side. But when you look at the centralized convection, there really is just a small area of centralized convection. So maybe I'm not on board with size limiting rapid deepening or even rapid intensification in terms of wind speed, because if a storm has a large influence, that doesn't really matter for intensification. What matters is the size of the inner core that develops in the end.
Oh, the interesting thing about the outflow of Infa is that models have been really trying to have a tropical system spin up for it. That's what the AOI we've been having marked has been the case for. The GFS, they pretty much take it off, and within the next 5 days, we see another storm that pretty much forms as Infa takes its approach towards Taiwan. You see a much different storm that is pretty much passing far to the east of Japan, at least the southern end of Japan. Although, of course, it does take a little bit of a northwestern turn at the end, and then we do see Japan impacted with the next 9 to 10 days. Of course, that is not me saying it's going to happen. As you get farther out in the models tend to become a little less believable. So it doesn't exactly say it's going to happen, but it's, of course, worth noting and watching, since they have been consistent with this. But of course, right now we have our own plate to deal with. We already have 2 storms that are land threats at the moment in the Western Pacific. You have Infa with Taiwan and Okinawa Islands, China for 10W, and possibly Taiwan later on.
Well, I'm most concerned about Infa doing a bit of a Winnie. With those 2 eye wall structures that were going on there. Hopefully it shouldn't do that. We're going to take a very short break here. We'll be back in a couple of moments and we'll get some model visualizations and more of your questions. Stay tuned. Over the years, we've done updates and live coverage on literally hundreds of tropical cyclones, and in recent years, particularly in 2020, launching out in other regional channels, doing weather updates and coverages there as well. We also launched our Earthquakes channel in 2020 and are going forward on all fronts in 2021 with a community that's grown remarkably in the last year. But it's not just about you being along for the ride, we want you to enjoy yourself as well as an Ultimate fan, and that's why we've lined up a big chain of benefits for each various stages on our Ultimate Fan program. Welcome back, this is Force 13 Live and the latest on 4 tropical cyclones that are all around the Pacific Ocean right now. We're centering on the largest one right now. This is Tropical Storm Infa and has the highest threat level really, a CDPS stage 6. Of course, we have Tropical Storm 10W, which will probably get a name soon, off the southern coast of China. You can see the edge of it on the left-hand side of this screen. And of course, we have Hurricane Felicia in the eastern Pacific, winding down slowly, and Tropical Storm Guillermo, which is not far from Isla Clarion, Mexico. Right now, though, we're going to get to some models, some of the GFS visualizations shortly, but first of all, let's take a look at Z's screen, and you are showing us the HWRF run.
Yeah, look at the massive eye first of all. It seems familiar to Winnie, I think, but
That one not so much, but it's a big eye.
that's what I meant. Granted,
Oh wow.
it is a model. Don't take this as actual fact, of course. Anyway,
But with a big system already like that, there's always the potential that it'll look like that later on down the line.
You are right. Its peak cloud is negative 80 Celsius in the southern band here, towards Iowa, southern band here, and posts in negative 70 plus in Iowa wall here, and
Right.
southern band here.
Why don't you run the simulation and see how it gets to that point?
I have to say the initialization of the HWRF looks completely wrong to me. I wouldn't take that much into that run. I mean, look at the initialization with this deep convection everywhere. There's basically blob, yeah, there, and then compare it to how the tropical cyclone looks at the current time, and it doesn't resemble at all what the tropical cyclone looks at the current time. So I think we can just leave it at there and don't trust this HWRF run because the initialization is just too bad.
What does the HWRF say about 10W then?
Well, they have it becoming a typhoon the last I checked from the 18Z. Of course, the 18Z is only up to hour 78.
Right.
And from what I am seeing on my end, they pretty much have it organizing itself as it heads towards China. It makes that landfall, but for some strange reason, it stays just parallel to like the actual shoreline, develops an eye while still at the shoreline before making landfall, and then redeveloping while it's still inland. So I really don't know what H4VRF is doing with this one. But I don't think that the storm is going to be intensifying into a category 2 type storm while it's literally just inland and staying just inland.
Yeah, that looks pretty weird.
I don't know how
HWRF.
else to explain it. This is just not a model run I'm typically used to seeing of what a storm would typically do inland. So I don't think H4 is the model to be used for any of the storms right now, at least specifically at the 18Z mark for sure.
Okay, then we'll lay that one to rest. And a question there about how strong do you think 10W is going to get? I mean, any thoughts from your end?
Based on its organization, I'm pretty much agreeing. I mean, I am making the code for it as we speak, just trying to figure out how I'm going to do the track of it, of course, given the fact it is quite an odd one for this specific part of the South China Sea. But I am going with 90 miles an hour just because of the fact that it's continuing to organize. We could be seeing rapid intensification out of this. And the fact that it's probably not going to get any stronger because you're going to be seeing a landfall within the next 36 hours anyways. So as we get closer to land, I'm pretty sure it's going to start topping off anyways. So really it's going to be the next 24 hours that play the big part. Now, the bigger question comes off of what happens when it exits, because of course we're going to be seeing that entrance into the China area, whether it exits out of the Hainan Peninsula or just simply just passing just to the east of it. That's another question. And then, of course, the next factor of what happens next, because there is definitely a good chance that this is going to be sticking with us a lot longer than we would want, given the fact that it is going to be intensifying once it is back out to the South China Sea, I should say.
Yep, and there it is once again. That's 10W that we were just talking about there. It can get quite confusing when we've got 4 storms active, and just to throw some more confusion into it, let's introduce Isaac. I don't know if he's able to speak, but he's showing us imagery, and I can't let it go to waste, of how Felicia has been looking today. There it is. Still looking impressive despite being off the boil a little bit. That's Felicia in the earlier parts of today.
Yeah, it currently suffers from passing over cooler sea surface temperatures and basically the eye collapsing slowly and less convection and slowly weakening over these cooler waters, probably about 25 or 26 degrees Celsius, right up there.
Yep, so there we have it, and just that wider view of the Eastern Pacific again. You can see everything that's going on and how far they are out to sea and continuing on their way out. If you've got any questions for us, you can send them in at any time during our 2 hours on the air tonight. We had one from a little earlier. Samuel says that they have a multifaceted question. Is it possible that 99W's intensity may be halted by the outflow of Infa? And looking at the GEFS and ECMWF, they have a consensus, and ECM wants 954.
Well, the first thing I can say right off the bat is that 99W is now known as 10W.
Yep. And I'm not sure if they're referring to Infa being 954 or, God forbid, 10W being 954 millibars.
Oh my goodness, I
imagine it would be Infa.
Yeah, I hope neither one is the case, to be completely honest. But yeah, if I had to decide which one that would have been, I would say Infa as well.
To the question though, is it possible that 10W's intensity may be halted by Infa's outflow?
I mean, it could be. It just depends how close the two systems get to each other, and how big they are as well.
When you take a look at the 200 millibar winds, I don't really think so, because most Actually, now it's the same, but most of the outflow goes directly to the eastern side of Infa, so there wouldn't be so much interference with the anticyclonic momentum and the other tropical cyclone, which is in the South China Sea.
You know what? I've just realised right now as we look at the visible that 10W is looking pretty good.
Is it?
And to talk about it right now is someone who's in the outer edges of it. Kenneth, good morning to you.
Yes. Good morning from here.
I'm sure you've got plenty of thoughts of your own on 10W and maybe some information for us since you're closer than any of us.
Yeah, so I'll start from 10W. So since its destination, I already been noticing that pretty much since it is first designated as an invest, despite at that moment there's not much model support, but I've seen especially one model from Hong Kong Observatory, which especially shows support, and I already suspecting that will it also be a rapid intensification trend, because I looked at CIMSS upper level analysis. There's no specific significant outflow from the front that is mostly a favorable environment for mostly July-August period, with over 30 degrees Celsius of sea surface temperature. And okay, when it's been designated, okay, and here is standby signal number 1 issued in Hong Kong and Macau, and Shah's been here. And just within few hours after the low-level center has been established, already it has been dropping an eye wall, which can be seen since around 12 a.m. here, which I already make a very explicit forecast that okay, this will be a storm that reaches 90 to 105 miles per hour.
Really?
It's extremely rapid intensification trend. Yes, I'm not joking right now.
Oh yeah,
because
I'm sure that that's not
Yeah.
out of the question considering its location and its all of the parameters of it.
There are two things that I think that will be such rapid. First of all, it's currently stalling. It nearly moved nil. It moved nil in the past 6 hours. This is the first thing. The second thing is there are pretty several analogs that which systems in the South China Sea can just went kaboom and rapidly intensify. They're
Yep.
pretty much a pretty famous three. I absolutely remember. First of all, Vicente 2012.
Yep.
Second one, Hato 2017. And the next one, which is last year, Higgles of 2020, which is all rapidly intensify inside South China Sea within a day, which the rapid intensification of that is just not out of question. Also, based on the current satellite appearance, it just recently had a centralized blast, which is very newly initialized.
I think you can,
after
Kenneth.
sunshine.
I think you can already see an eye wall structure appearing on the satellite visible now.
Yeah. Of course, especially in radar, and also in radar, and maybe this centralized blast of a formation of CDO. This probably may be contracting its eye wall, even though already in such intensity, which suggests that it probably has a very decent intensity, rapidly intensifying, and I'm expecting a 10 knot increase per 6 hour.
That seems reasonable.
Yeah, that's totally not out of question.
So that's something that's happening right now that we're monitoring. And Kenneth, what do you think of Infa right now and its intensification rate?
Yeah. So throughout the whole 18th, when I look at the storm, it still looks very sheared by it's still very much being sheared, and the western side development is being severely inhibited because there's an upper level low giving upper level convergence, which you need upper level divergence for tropical cyclone development. But for upper level divergence nearby, it would just inhibit it and make it lopsided. But as of recent frames, I've discovered that it started getting wrapped around, and microwave imagery now currently suggests that it has been wrapped around and being less shared.
Yep.
The mid level and lower level center become a bit more stacked to more or less a bit stacked, slightly tilted, which already is a pretty decent improvement. And by, if I remember correctly, an SSMIS microwave path, 36 gigahertz, it already showed a low level, pretty much something I will like.
Now, Kenneth, what I really wanted to ask you about this, and I asked a few others earlier, is that the GFS at the 18Z, and it's been saying it all along, has the storm rapidly intensifying in terms of pressure. But for the 18Z to verify, to get towards 930, which is the peak, it would already have to be 973 now. So do you think that the intensity forecast is overblown, or do you think it's already starting to happen now, maybe just a little bit behind, because we're still running with 991, aren't we?
Yes, and also we'll have a next fix at 8 a.m. will be releasing soon. The analyst team is currently doing it. So regarding to back to GFS, I think it's a bit overestimated the intensification rate. Yes, I agree that it's starting to picking up, and the intensification trend should be increasing right now. But is it like what GFS expecting that rapid? I don't think so. So the first thing is that pretty many models and pretty much current structure with two bandings wrapping at the center, with two bandings wrapping. It seems that it's very likely that a large eye will exhibit, which for a large eye, although it's more, it can be more resistant to some less favorable conditions. But a large eye also means that the intensification rate, the deepening rate, will not be that rapid. But the intensification rate is pretty much can be pretty significant. As I see the recent upper level analysis, the wind shear has just dropped pretty dramatically, and should be enough favorable for a more significant intensification. But as of now, given that pretty much it has a rather large eye, from a research from some meteorological experts, it's discovered that the larger the eye, the harder that it can rapidly deepen. Pretty much won't exceed like 30 millibars each per 6 hours, but it's just a very optimum situation, and I don't think Infa has such extreme conditions to rapidly intensify in such rate. Also because of the broad structure, as I mentioned. So as in my forecast, actually, I would expect at least a category 2, maybe high end, or mid, around 105 to 110 miles per hour typhoon. Not exactly to a rate that exhibit that large from the GFS, and from the pressurized, given the around 105 to 110 forecast from me, and the wind pressure relationship, and actually rather low environmental pressure, as is pretty usual in the Western Pacific, especially in July, August. I'll expect something around 950, which is in the middle range of the model forecast, I believe.
Yep. All right. Let's go back
Which they have been
though.
pretty
I
recent.
just want to go back to imagery.
Okay.
We've got radar from Isaac showing us 10W right now, and you can take a look at that, showing some significant wrapping around there. What do our team make of that?
Give me a second.
Everyone's fumbling around, loading up the radars. But
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Too many storms to track.
there's
yeah,
a
it
lot
looks
going
like
on.
Yeah, but can be more in the future. We don't know this year.
Yeah, it looks like a pretty good formative eyewall to me, and I definitely are on board that this is a sign of a rapid organization and intensification trend.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely getting itself together. Definitely has well-defined circulation at the very least. You really cannot look at this and tell me it doesn't. And it's really just continuing to get itself organized as it heads towards China. Of course, its small size makes it pretty good in terms of its ability to rapidly intensify. Smaller storms tend to have an easier time intensifying, just as they do have a smaller time weakening. But of course, the good conditions will, of course, allow this to intensify a bit substantially before it does make that landfall, which is why we are going with that high-end Category 1 for our forecasted peak intensity.
All right, crossing back over to the Eastern Pacific right now, and there was a question earlier from Luno saying, is there a reason for Felicia's small size and Guillermo's large size?
Well, it probably depends on several factors. The most important one is probably how large the initial disturbances were of the storms. I remember
My memory
that
isn't that long already.
I remember that Guillermo's initial disturbance was pretty large in influence, and also the outer environment of Felicia has been pretty dry, so it wasn't able to generate as much inflow and as much banding around it that appears its size to be bigger.
Okay, well, I think on that note, we'll end this hour of discussion. We've got another one coming up, which is probably good news. So we'll be taking a short break here to gather our thoughts once again, and we'll be back with more and the models, the GFS 18Z, which I've still yet to show on the graphics that we use, to take a proper look at what's coming up in the next 7 days and beyond. We'll probably properly explore that. I'm losing my language here. We'll be back in just a moment with the latest on all 4 of these tropical cyclones across the Pacific. You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Well, what is traditionally our Tropical Weather Bulletin hour is an extended Tropical Weather Bulletin live stream, which is now in its second hour of coverage, and we're here talking about 4 tropical cyclones across the Pacific Ocean. Thankfully, nothing in the Atlantic, not even an area of interest, so that's quite relieving. However, what isn't is 2 tropical cyclones that are immediately threatening land. And one of them, which is 10W, which appears to be strengthening quite rapidly. The other one, which is on our screen right now, the latest imagery from Himawari 8 showing us Tropical Storm Infa, as it looks like it's beginning an intensification phase as well. So we've got 2 intensifying storms there, and in the Eastern Pacific we've got possibly 2 weakening storms. One of them's Felicia, which is obviously weakening down to Category 3 after peaking yesterday. And Guillermo, which is not officially weakening yet, but isn't looking very good on satellite imagery as it passes close to the small Isla Clarion offshore Mexico. My name is Nathan Foy for the second hour of coverage tonight. It's nice to see everyone again. Of course, we're here doing what we need to do. I'm joined by my team this hour, consisting of Isaac in the background. I don't think you'll be hearing him. Z, Christian, Kenneth, Noah, and Xavier. Hello once again.
Good evening.
Hello.
Hello.
Again.
So we're looking at geocolor imagery wide shot of the Western Pacific right now. Really gives you an idea of the size of these cyclones, and it's not just Infa. With 10W, you can sort of see a wider influence of clouds extending right down to where is that? Towards the Philippines, the southern Philippines, but obviously the main bulk of it is right off the coast of China. Where should we begin at this point? Is there any news, any updates from any of the agencies?
We did just release the latest fix on all 4 storms.
Wow.
I guess I can get that done. Felicia, we are now down to 120 miles an hour with a pressure of 961 millibars. Guillermo is at 60 miles an hour with a pressure of 998 millibars. Infa we now have at 60 miles an hour with a pressure of 986 millibars. And 10W we now have 60 miles an hour with a pressure of 988 millibars.
And as you saw in that imagery just before, the mesoscale has just given up on Felicia now. So no more 1 minute imagery there. I don't know where it's gone to. Where's that? Alaska. We've got a wider shot there showing the water vapor imagery of both of those systems. This is the imagery I tried to load up in the first hour. It spontaneously stopped working, but it's back again. And you can quite clearly see in terms of the vast ocean just how tiny Felicia is, and honestly Guillermo doesn't look much bigger there. A testament to the vastness of the ocean if nothing else, but there you have it. Felicia's still looking decent. Let's just see what this next one was. Oh, there's another view. That's the true color imagery of what it's looking like there in the Eastern Pacific right now. A wide shot, and you can take a look at Guillermo once again there, being sheared pretty heavily by the looks of things, and the low-level circulation is racing away right now.
I have a fun size comparison. The low-level center and the mid-level center of Guillermo are about as misaligned in terms of sheer distance as the entirety of Felicia at its peak. So you could fit the entirety of Hurricane Felicia at its peak between the low-level and mid-level center of Guillermo at this current time, which is pretty incredible.
Yep, so that's a tale of two different storms. How one made it and the other one is a little bit floppy. But there we have it. If you have any questions for us this hour, start your message with Force 13 all in text and we'll take your questions at the end of this hour. That's the end of our 2-hour coverage for tonight. But if you're watching on our live link on YouTube, youtube.com/Force13/live, that will throw you back to the automated stream afterwards, which is keeping tabs on all 4 of these tropical cyclones with imagery of all 4 sliding along. So you'll never be out of date with that. So that's something else for you to take a look at after we've finished up here. All right, so I think let's go back to the top story this hour, which is on Isaac's screen, and that's the quite clear intensification phase possibly, and certainly organization of Tropical Storm 10W, which we're waiting on a name from the JMA, the official agency. Hasn't come yet, but I'm sure it will soon.
Quite the storm, I must say. 10W just really trying to get its act together right now. See just the moisture it's trying to draw in here, and then they also got to the far off to the northeast here, away from the radar view. Of course, Infa ongoing right now, so a double threat in the Western Pacific right now. So I hope everybody is taking both of those storms seriously, because both in their own ways are extremely dangerous systems, and especially 10W here, as it's so close to the coast right now, and it's forecast to make landfall actually, and before it comes back off the coast, is going to be a more immediate threat than Infa is right now. But both again are really bad threats, and I hope again everybody's taking them seriously. As you can see with 10W, just look at that radar.
And is that a very recent frame?
Give me a second. This is from 8 minutes ago.
Yeah. So that
and look at that band in there.
Certainly how it's going currently. Kenneth, you mentioned earlier that you are under standby signals now in Hong Kong and Macau?
Yes, standby signal number 1 still in force in Hong Kong and Macau, and is expected to maintain in the morning. That is the latest advisory.
So what does that mean for those of us outside of the region signal 1?
Standby signal, the definition of is that means that there's a tropical cyclone within 800 kilometers of Hong Kong and may affect here. That is the definition of standby signal number 1.
So would it be like a watch then, in Atlantic terms?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
Mostly a watch, but not yet tropical storm, because there's literally can be no gale wind. Sometimes can be extremely hot because of the subsidence current.
Yes, indeed. So what are we thinking about potential landfall time, or is there credence to potential for this thing to actually stall offshore for a little while?
Yeah, it can act. As of now, from radar imagery, as I see, it's still stalling. But as forecast and recent movement, it moved northward a bit. But yeah, I mean, a bit of kilometers, but yeah, mostly still stalling. But it's also within the forecast of China Meteorological Administration, the Hong Kong Observatory. It will have a northward jog since later today, and will slowly curve towards northwest and make landfall near Jiangmen City or Yangjiang City in western Guangzhou. The landfall time expected currently is mostly around midnight 21st, which is Wednesday.
Wow.
Just Tuesday night, it will be the closest approach to the coast and will make landfall Wednesday midnight.
Keep in mind that the longer it stays over water, the more chance it has to get even better organized than if it was to immediately go inland and then come back out. So really,
Yeah.
really a scary situation here for those along the coast here.
So as it
Yeah.
is right now,
So
it's about 70 miles offshore, something like that. And you're saying it'll be a day and a half before landfall.
yes, there's one thing that's noteworthy is that Infa's influence is way so big, while 10W is relatively a very small system. So the water vapor supply actually they somewhat is like yeah see because Infa may dominate the water vapor supply and well see whether 10W can safeguard its water vapor supply and not being taken by Infa. Because similar case that a larger storm outside South China Sea, the water supply can be just taken away. And while the system inside South China Sea is smaller, it can just lost the supply and with its circulation flipped. Which this has occurred, but yeah, as of now, the strengthening trend hasn't stopped. So yeah, and not a big much an issue, but we'll wait and see after like 12 to 24 hours, I think.
All right. Just about to look back at info again, just trying to get the imagery. Sometimes when it updates, it can run a little slow. We'll get that in just a moment. But Infa also strengthening right now, and we'll get the models in just a moment, the latest GFS. There's some frames coming through now. So another look at Infa, and it looks like it's getting that core. Still some work to do. But certainly a very large influence.
Yep, for sure. And I discussed an hour ago how massive the inflow is, extending all the way into parts of the northern Philippines there. And of course, I was in a call with some of our Force 13 Philippine members, and they've been saying that these storms are going to be helping enhance the southwest monsoon there. So that is also something that's going to be interesting to watch with that.
And there's some new frames on the rapid scan, showing some convection blowing up there right now. Alright, let's see if we can get to the model zone then. The GFS is what I always have here, the easiest accessible, at least for the whole world. So this it gives you a fair idea usually. So this is the Eastern Pacific right now, but we'll come back to that in a moment. Let's just start where a lot of people get very excited for some reason, which is the Atlantic. I'd like to point out that I don't think anything's forecasted. There is a interesting tiny little low pressure system here, which is between two banks of high pressures, so that's rather interesting, but that's not going to do anything. Looking in the longer term for the Atlantic, we've got sweet nothing by the looks of it, so that's fantastic. Although I do wonder whether one of these frontal systems could develop a little spin-up tropical cyclone when they come about. You know, there's a few little opportunities there. But we're certainly not looking at anything big in the Atlantic anytime soon, so that's very pleasing to see. Looking to the Eastern Pacific then right now. So quite clearly you can make out Felicia, initializing it as a category 2 by the looks of it, and you've got Guillermo on the right hand side as a mid-range tropical storm, and you can see the size difference there as well. The green zones obviously are the tropical storm force winds. So off they go. Felicia really dying off, although it's still going as a tropical storm there, battling actually a little bit more than it did in previous runs, passing quite clearly south of Hawaii. There it is at that point. Winds near tropical storm force, as it goes past Hawaii and then off into the abyss. And then you've got Guillermo, which I don't think gets as far either, but interestingly, its remnants could become very elongated and affect the Hawaiian Islands, giving a little bit of wind by the looks of things all around here, northern side mainly actually, so not very much. Let's just take a little look in the Eastern Pacific long range. Looks like a new system forms there. Well, a wannabe system, in the very long range, another hurricane by the looks of things that stays out to sea. So that's fun. The Western Pacific then, obviously, here's another representation of the size difference. You look at Infa there, and this is interesting that the GFS, and I don't know what you guys think about this, but GFS is initializing Infa with winds of, figure out what that is, initializing it with winds of 65 miles per hour.
Slightly stronger than what we have it at.
Yeah, honestly, I was expecting you to go a bit higher, but yeah, no, that's not as bad as I was expecting. We've got it. It's a bit higher than what we currently have it at.
Alright, well, here we go
Honestly,
then. Go ahead.
It just in my opinion, it makes sense. I mean, a tropical cyclone fix without a recon plane will always have some uncertainty, and that uncertainty is about 50 knots. So if it's not jumping up or down 15 knots or greater, that's probably at least wind. Looking at the winds, that's probably pretty good.
So GFS watching very closely here. So this is where we are in 12 hours according to it. And you've got 10W as a borderline typhoon and Infa as a category 1. I'm not sure if that will happen. In 24 hours, a little bit over 24 hours, you've got 10W making landfall as a typhoon, and Infa looks like it's a category 2. And there's the GFS. Look how large it gets, and a big peak there. This is the GFS model, which looks like it might be overdoing it a bit. Forecasting there a 130 mile an hour peak.
Oh wow, that's
Pretty impressive.
impressive.
With an enormous wind field, enormous typhoon wind field for Taiwan there. So that would be a very big land, and those southern Japanese islands, Miyakojima in particular would be on the southern side. Yayama actually would be on the northern side, unless it's the other way around. I keep forgetting with those islands. I think it's Miyakojima that's on the southern side of the eye wall. Anyway, it goes on into China there, probably a category 1 landfall as the stuffing gets knocked out by Taiwan, the passage over near Taiwan. Very interesting to see the whole profile there as it makes that landfall. You can see 10W trying to regenerate, but it really gets sucked into the influence of Infa, and you just look at that massive amount of tropical storm force winds extending all the way from Infa round Taiwan and to the coast of Vietnam.
Oh yeah, look at that. I'm just curious what's off to the right.
Yes, behind that we've got this big mess which could be another tropical system. Look at the state of that. And
Yep,
that is enormous. That looks like a typhoon. My
Yep.
goodness.
And
That-
under
Where
enormous.
is that going into? Is that like what part of Honshu is
And that will hit, that says it's going to hit Japan. That is later on in the forecast period. That's what, the 26th, so day 7.
I don't want to. That looks like it's in between, somewhere in between Tokyo and Sendai, if I had to guess.
And then look at this. You have a massive mess, big, river of strong winds pushing all the way up there. Wow.
Wow.
So the Western Pacific basically is going to be a mess for a few weeks. Indian Ocean,
Brilliant.
there was a hint or two of maybe something forming again. Looks like it's going to be this that it was picking up on earlier, not so strong now. That's not going to happen. Oh dear, longer range has something else there. That's not going to happen. And that's and that's about it really. So that's everything. In short, beyond what we've got on our plate right now, there's not much else to see, and I think 4 storms right now is quite enough, don't you?
Yeah, it's more than enough. Especially at the same time.
Let's go back to our rapid scan imagery of Infa, and we'll see if we've got some questions. Start your message with Force 13 all in text whilst we're on the air for the next 35 to 40 minutes. Will 10W have a typhoon landfall in China and Taiwan? Certainly not Taiwan, that's the other one. But it looks like it will be a typhoon landfall, especially when you look at it strengthening right now. And Z, you're actually showing us some other imagery as well. Let's cross over to that for a moment. Which one's this? Is that Infa? Yes.
Yes, this is Infa. There's some more convection in its center right now. It's turning more of a blackish color, which is signifies that it's around negative 80 degrees Celsius.
People are asking about water temperatures as well, so I can actually get that up on the model here. So I'll just bring the water temperatures up for the whole area.
For what storm? Infa?
I'll just look at everywhere, so you can see as we probe these temperatures, the Atlantic, it only does Fahrenheit on here, so yeah, I'll have to convert as we go along. The magic number for the 26 Celsius area is about 79 degrees Fahrenheit. Maybe 78 you'll get away with it, but in the 80s particularly you'll get the good temperatures for cyclone formation. So they're dropping off a little bit over the Aussie Eastern Atlantic, but as you get into the Western Atlantic over there towards the Lesser Antilles, low 80s, into the Caribbean Sea, very warm across the whole Caribbean, especially look towards the northwest, getting up towards 29 degrees Celsius. The Western Atlantic, about 28 generally for a large area there, and right up off the US East Coast, the eastern seaboard, 80 degrees on the same latitude as New Jersey probably there. Around Bermuda, a little bit of a cool spot there, but no, warm temperatures all across the Atlantic. Just move on towards the west there. Gulf of Mexico, pretty much warm across the board. This area around Florida is probably still very slightly below average because of Elsa, but that will catch up pretty soon. Eastern Pacific is a different story. It is very warm off the coast of Mexico. High temperatures, 28, 29 degrees. As you get further out, and let's just get up the storms for reference right now. It's only showing one of them, I don't know why. Felicia is somewhere here. Temperatures where it is right now are about 25 degrees Celsius, I think. Certainly starting to decrease, and those temperatures drop to about 23, 22, unless it goes further southwest where those temperatures are warmer, just a little bit further close to the equator. But is that even in the right place for Guillermo? I'm not sure that's correct, but we'll just leave that there. That might be the right place for Guillermo. There it is right now. Temperature's about 26 degrees Celsius, so barely tolerable. But you see, in contrast, the Atlantic, huge parts of the Eastern Pacific there, down into the 60s. Around Hawaii, fairly warm enough for cyclones just, particularly on the western side. But then we move to the Western Pacific, it's a lot warmer here. Off the Philippines, temperatures touching 30 degrees there in some areas. You can actually see, just about make out, a whole spiral line there where the waters are a little bit cooler, and that corresponds with the cloud pattern of Infa. Obviously temperatures will be cooler under there, but still, despite that, it's well above what's needed. 27 at the lowest, rising up to about 29 into the East China Sea, 28, and it only drops off a little bit as it gets towards the coast of China, so it's only right on the coast. And down where 10W is, you know, those conditions that it can make the most of. 29 degrees Celsius across the South China Sea, if not a little bit warmer than that. So sea surface temperatures aren't going to be an issue for the Western Pacific storms at all.
Yeah, I just looked at the Coral Reef Watch and it shows about 1.5 to 2 degrees sea surface temperatures above average for 10W. So if the upper level environment holds on, that's pretty much prime conditions for even rapid strengthening.
Absolutely. And let's see what imagery you're showing us now. Oh, same imagery as before. I thought we'd moved on to something else, but that is the infrared of Infa, and certainly those black areas. What's this?
Models for Infa.
That's the GFS, that's the one that we were looking at just a moment ago, so that's just another visualization of that.
Let me go to 10W here.
Yeah, I'm a bit short of imagery on 10W in particular, so that would be very much welcome. So there's a little look. That flare up there, that later one, is really what we're interested in. Potentially a big flare up that will wrap around an eye feature. Well, we know there's an eye feature there already, of course. Let's just bring up the visible imagery again once it gets there. In the meantime, we'll take a question or two. Well, there it is, once again showing you that area wrapping around. Will 10W interact in any way with Infa?
Certainly, yes. Actually, right now, it is somewhat already be interacting. In terms of taking away the water vapor supply. Infa is attempting to doing that, and later on after landfall, as 10W weakens significantly, and then it would just dive southward, and actually that U-turn, that loop, is already a Fujiwara effect with Infa, and the more southward track, westward track of Infa is already also a Fujiwara effect due to 10W, but with a geometrical center more closer to Infa because of the influence and intensity at that moment. So yeah, pretty much not in some way. Pretty much, it is pretty certain that yeah, it has a high probability that 10W will interact with Infa in the form of Fujiwara effect.
But the GFS there on that forecast, Kenneth, after it emerges back out into the South China Sea, it gets completely gobbled up by Infa's influence. It effectively becomes one of its outer bands.
It is because the GFS expect a more inland track and more land towards inside the sea, because GFS in ATC run expects a comeback in the Gulf of Tonkin.
Yes.
Which that 10W needs a farther track inland in before coming back to sea, which makes it suffer from more damage from land interaction, which makes it even weaker, like may not even be discernible before it really comes back to sea, and yeah, it will just easily be merged into the southwest monsoon and then bring to the influence of Infa. But as of now, it's not really that likely. It will just most models and current agencies forecast just want a landfall and then stay inland like around 2 days, and then move back to the ocean, possibly just east of Hainan province, just east of it, and then looped back towards east or southeast as of current forecast.
That's what the JTWC is saying, of course, right now. We're going to take another short break here, and then we'll be back with the final part of tonight's coverage on everything that's going on out there in the wild Pacific. We'll be back in just a moment. Over the years, we've done updates and live coverage on literally hundreds of tropical cyclones, and in recent years, particularly in 2020, launching out in other regional channels, doing weather updates and coverages there as well. We also launched our Earthquakes channel in 2020 and are going forward on all fronts in 2021 with a community that's grown remarkably in the last year. But it's not just about you being along for the ride, we want you to enjoy yourself as well as an Ultimate fan, and that's why we've lined up a big chain of benefits for each various stages on our Ultimate Fan program. And this is the final part of tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin, a 2-hour special for everything that's going on in the Pacific Ocean, east and west. We're looking east right now, showing you the two storms there, Felicia and Guillermo, although it looks like the time on top is starting to run out for this basin as it transfers to the western Pacific, which appears to be getting significant momentum, particularly in the last few hours. We're getting increasingly concerned about what's going on in the South China Sea as Tropical Storm 10W continues to look pretty damn good and intensifying and possibly on its way to typhoon status already, and it's not even been named by the Japanese Meteorological Agency. Let's take a look back at that imagery now. The infrared from Z's screen there showing that latest flare-up and how that is exactly over the center and a band around that as well. Do we have any word on what the radar is, the latest radar, and what that's showing, if anything?
I'm starting to see some circulations in here. Instead of some sort of convective blob, it's starting to become somewhat organized.
Oh yeah.
Radar is showing it moving northwest towards this portion of Guangdong.
That's really wrapping around there.
Indeed.
Yes.
So Kenneth, a sure sign of strengthening.
Yes, probably. Yeah, indeed, it is still showing some signs of strengthening, and seems the winds are escalating a bit here, as the door is a bit noisy. Yep, as the winds, get a bit escalated, and the showers has never stopped here, and back to the core structure, it is still contracting the eye, from previously, as I measured, from around 25 kilometers I to currently just 15 to less than 20, probably like 15 kilometers I diameter, which contracting pretty much really shows intensification is still going on and is still in a pretty rapid trend.
Yep, there's some latest imagery there of both of these cyclones. They still look rather messy when you look at it this way. Looks much more pretty on the visible, but they are both organizing at this point. Would you say that Infa is actively deepening right now as well, Kenneth?
Not the rate may not as pretty much not as steep as 10W.
Yeah.
I'll say it's in a slow to normal development trend, considering it is just recovering from what's been harmed because of the wind shear earlier. pretty much the whole day yesterday. And right now, although a lower level eye wall is formed, it still needs to sustain a bit further before more deepening can be done, which of course it is forecasted. So right now wind shear is it's been resisting the wind shear because the upper level low originally near Korea has been weakened because less organized, which gave less shear to Infa, which makes it beginning to recover more, which is a good thing to Infa, but not to land.
Right.
And so currently it's slowly deepening, but not as deep as well. I expect a trend of currently around 5 to 10, no, within 12-hour period, I think. In terms of Dvorak, or I'll say around 0.5 T per 24 hour, like in the first 12 to 24 hour trend, but it'll become more rapid, like 1 T per 24 hour trend for
All
normal
right,
trend.
we'll see.
With that, nothing rapid's going on.
Let's take some questions though at this point. We have a few that came in. Felicia is really struggling. Its eye is still filling in and now nearly invisible on visible imagery. Its convection is warming and it's getting asymmetric. And do we have any thoughts on it? I can give you one thought. The rapid scan has gone on it now, so we can't give you any close-up imagery, at least at my end. But you can take a look at that zoomed out view. Let's see if we can really home in on that, if we can. I'm just gonna try and work with this imagery. Well, you get a little idea there. Zoom on in that. Felicia starting to look quite a bit ropey now.
Well, yeah, that's the effect of low sea surface temperatures. I mean, it has been doing extremely well in like 27.5 to 27 degrees sea surface temperatures. Has been a very significant major hurricane in those rather cool waters. Even in like 26.5 degrees or so has been looking marvelously good. And now the effects of lower sea surface temperatures are beginning to show up in the tropical cyclone structure, and it begins to look pretty bad and fall apart in this classic low sea surface temperature evolution of first the eye fills in and the convection wanes, and you get holes in the convection and the whole tropical cyclone essentially falls apart.
Well, there we go. We've got some better imagery now. Noah star here, showing how the storm has been evolving or maybe devolving in the last, I think this is 6 hours or so. An 8-hour loop, I think it is actually. And that eye has really shrunk and it's barely there at all now. It's collapsing. And if we have a little bit of time towards the end, we might have that big argument about whether it was a Category 5 or not. It still looked pretty good there 8 hours ago at the beginning of that imagery. Let's take some more questions. Do we do a surf forecast, says J.O., because I want to know how Guillermo's remnants will affect the swell coming into Jaws Banzai pipeline down the line. I imagine that's Hawaii. I might be a bit ignorant. It's certainly headed towards the Hawaiian Islands as a remnant low. I don't know much more than that at this point. And a question about what is the GFS? Well, we do mention it very often with the abbreviated, the acronym, but most people might still not know what it is. Can anyone tell us what the GFS is and some of the other models that we talk about on a regular basis?
So yeah, GFS stands for Global Forecasting System. It's a mid to long range model. On most model forecasts, it goes out I think 384 hours, and It is one of those models. Pretty much every side shows up, and it's pretty reliable. It has its flaws, but it's one of those models you first look into when a tropical cyclone is forming, and you do your analysis with it.
That pretty much sums it up there. Let's see if we have some more questions. I think one or two came in. Are there any warnings for Infa or 10W? Now, Kenneth, you mentioned the standby signal in Hong Kong and Macau. I'm not sure what's going on elsewhere.
I'm now currently checking what China has the warning. I'm checking. And as I looked at yesterday night, a white typhoon warning has been issued.
So where's that?
There's an imagery. I need to record a bit. Let me see the latest. Let me see anything.
Whilst we're waiting for that, just want to mention in Japan, there's a high wave warning and a gale advisory for Daiotojima. I believe it's all gale advisories all along almost the Ryukyu Islands. It's a high wave advisory for part of the Miyakojima region. In fact, all of the Miyakojima region. Yayama doesn't have any warnings out there just yet. Okinawa, high wave advisories at the moment. Sea swells. The Amami Islands is also the same, but no gale advisories out there yet, which is usually the tropical storm equivalent there. And I don't suppose there'll be warnings in Taiwan just yet, but I imagine they won't be far away. I can't find their website now, but there we go. So that's a look at 10W, which is looking very good on that latest visible imagery. Really impressive. And now we're switching over to Infa once again. Any moment now, it's almost on the screen on 10W's scope even. But there is Infa visible imagery over the last few hours now, and the visible imagery there. You can quite clearly see its shape. I do wonder whether the convection is just flailing about a little bit in the latest frames, maybe a little off center to the northwest.
Yeah, also kind of looks like that to me. Probably still a little bit misaligned.
Yep. That seems about right. Some more comments here. Is our friend Hone going to appear soon, or is he still hiding? Well, yeah.
As the person who makes the most jokes on whether Hone is coming or not at the end of the tropical weather bulletins, I can tell you that it's still going to be quite the wait. Even if you have Felicia crossing over into the Central Pacific, because it's possible that, or likely that it's going to do that, doesn't count. Obviously, if you're going to have a Central Pacific storm named Hone, it has to form actually inside the Central Pacific. So, given the fact that the Central Pacific remains hostile, as we can tell with Felicia, yeah, I don't think Hone is coming soon.
Well,
I mean, the GFS.
Sorry.
I mean, the GFS shows the MJO, the Magellan Oscillation, moving into the Central Pacific by in about 2 weeks or so, and that would probably have a small window of favorability in the basin, and generally in the Eastern Pacific.
There were some stray GFS runs in the last few days that we're putting out a possible Central Pacific storm, so you never know in the next 2 weeks or so.
Yeah.
Christian, who is now gone, he was with us just a moment ago in our call here, asked us a question as well on the chat. Was Felicia a Category 5?
Oh,
So
I think so.
yeah, let's have a little chat about this because it's been grinding on for a little bit, and we've not had the chance to air it properly on the air. So we went with the Category 5 status for a brief time. Is it 2 days ago? I don't even remember what day we're on. But that caused some waves in the community. I personally don't think it was a Category 5 operationally. I've not had a chance to look back at it yet. So, Noah.
Well, I had a little talk with Mike and Kevy, and on water vapor imagery, the eye was negative 13 degrees Celsius, and usually that's just one above Hurricane Dorian. So the smaller your numbers in the negative is, so 0 degrees on water vapor would be extremely dry, and negative 60 or so would be extremely wet. And negative 13 is very dry eye. Hurricane Dorian had negative 12 degrees, and we both didn't remember a single time where a tropical cyclone had an eye on water vapor imagery that was that dry, where a plane went in and it didn't find 145 to 150 knot winds. In addition to that, it had a very stable and warm eye. The eye about 20 degrees Celsius. That's pretty warm, and also its stability throughout the entire life cycle of Felicia was pretty amazing, just remaining the small circular area of subsidence within the central dense overcast, not wobbling anyway. That also shows that it's a pretty stable, steady state, intense tropical cyclone, and also that it has it also acquired for some time. It did actually had a white on the Dvorak scale white ring, which is negative 70 degrees, negative 70 degrees Celsius on the cloud tops, and also as I said, 20 degree 20 degree eye. And usually when you combine those, you get usually when you see this structure, it's usually a Category 5. Yeah.
All right.
So
Anyone
that,
else?
Personally, I haven't looked too far into all the interesting bits of it. I know it's been quite the interesting storm. I, of course, still have it higher than the National Hurricane Center, which, of course, the official peak right now is 145. I presently have it at 155, which would still pretty much make it a high in Category 4. I'm pretty much gonna reanalyze it at the end of this and see whether I will upgrade it, because I tend to be conservative with things, so it very well could have been. I know we had it at 165, and I know the analyst team will be reanalyzing this, and of course, we do have these track animations for storms that, of course, are this notable, so I'm pretty sure there will be a track animation that will have the final intensity that we'll be running with soon enough.
Well,
and
let's hope so.
I think I immediately noticed about Felicia is that it looked very similar to Hurricane Felix at its peak intensity, which, based on recon data, we have rated in the database with 180 miles per hour. So I personally think that Felicia got severely underestimated, but that's a topic for reanalysis debate from the data analysts.
Oh no, another
Yeah.
thing that I found people were comparing it to was Isabel of 2003.
Uh, Yeah, because it's an annular because it was an annular cyclone, but I haven't looked into Isabel 2003 that much. I know that Isabel 2003 had this very large pinwheel eye, and Felicia didn't have. It had a pretty small eye, was pretty small storm, and Isabel was a large storm, large eye. So I don't know how valid the comparison actually is.
Kenneth,
Yep.
any thoughts?
Uh, well, for me, I'll focus more on maximum potential intensity, because pretty much this is what the main point is of the estimates, because despite of extremely impressive appearance, the maximum potential intensity, the formula, never suggests an intensity more than like 130 to 135 knots. Despite such intense structure, that's why we do need some more extensive research on what's the true maximum potential intensity in more precise calculation. In what circumstances or in what ways can a storm really exceed it further, especially that Felicia is in a fully barotropic environment with no jet interaction, unlike Patricia, which, yeah, the likeliness of exceeding it is even unlikely, but we still can't rule it out, because each specific just really needs even more research and more, yeah, things in for, yeah, because most storm really many East Pacific storm at the open sea without recon, we witnessed many cases that it was just when rapid intensification just went boom, and yeah, pretty much in those cases that really warrants a lot of research effort and, yeah, input into those research, and have all feedback and improvement into the whole quality of the meteorological community in terms of the analysis, especially of course inside the East Pacific itself.
Yeah, the problem with MPI, maximum potential intensity, is that that's a theoretical concept to estimate the very highest intensity that the tropical cyclone can reach. And the problem is that you need sea surface temperature data for that. And what we've seen with Alicia is that the sea surface temperature data has been uh, has been showing a little bit lower SSTs on, for example, Weather Nerd's IR satellite with the sea surface temperature contour. It has shown lower sea surface temperatures than what was actually measured, about 0.5 degrees Celsius. And also, a thing that we probably have to consider is how cold the upper troposphere was, because when you cool the upper troposphere about 300 millibars, it has the same effect as you warm up the sea surface temperatures, because there's more instability in the vertical column of the atmosphere. And now I forgot what I had to say, but yeah.
We might have to do a whole debate program on this at some point. Yes,
Yeah.
I know.
And they're big
Jo, they're
topic.
going into further questions. We won't have time for that tonight, unfortunately. At this point, I think I have to summarize a little more about what's going on right now before we finish up our coverage. Kenneth, we will be back on the air tomorrow, or well, tomorrow my time, this evening your time.
Yes.
What time was that again, local to you?
It is currently 8:54 a.m. We are UTC plus 8.
Yes, so 7 p.m. your time.
Indeed.
So, and China and Japan are the same time zone, right? I know
No,
they've got different
Japan is
names.
an hour. Japan is 1 hour ahead of China.
All right. So that would be 7 Chinese time and 8 p.m. In Japan that we would be next on
Indeed.
the air. In the meantime, once we come off here, we'll have our automated stream if you're watching us on the live link, youtube.com/force13/live. And that will keep you up to date with everything. But right now we're just looking at the latest satellite imagery of 10W. Well, all right, I'll take that. I'll field that question from Jo there, just to throw that to you guys. Thoughts on the idea that Dvorak type analysis underestimates annular cyclone strength, and on the flip side exaggerates pinhole eye cyclones?
Well, first of all, Dvorak generally underestimates tropical cyclones that are in a low tropopause environment. So it basically works like you have a ring around the eye, and you for every new color scheme you put out, you put another 0.5 onto the scale, and when you have low tropopause, the decline in intensity isn't as drastic as Dvorak indicates. So generally, low tropopause tropical cyclones are underestimated, and annular tropical cyclones just happen to be mostly low tropopause because they happen in lower sea surface temperature environments. About 25.5 to 28.5 degrees Celsius is where annular cyclones occur, because when you have higher sea surface temperatures, you have more convection around the tropical cyclone, which means banding, and an annular cyclone doesn't have any banding. That's the definition of it. And low sea surface temperature environment also usually means a lower tropopause environment. So yes, Dvorak often underestimates annular cyclones, but that kind of has to do with it underestimating low tropopause. And also pinhole storms were actually known to be underestimated by Dvorak because the satellite can't see all the way down to the surface of the eye and measure the temperature inside of it. Hurricane Eta, for example, is a pretty drastic example. But it doesn't really show a pinhole eye example just for pinholes. It more or less shows that Dvorak has problems with overestimating extremely high tropopause temperature environments. So Eta had like -85 ring. So raw Dvorak put out extreme numbers like 8.4 or something like that.
God.
Yeah, that's. Thank you for coming for my TED talk to Dvorak.
Oh yeah, can I say something before you finish that off? I'm just saying that on top of the automated streaming service that we've got rolling out, we also have 2 video updates that will be coming tonight. One that will be coming within the next half hour or so from our very own Christian. And then, of course, I will be doing the Infa update that will be coming in about 2 hours.
Crikey, always busy here. We have to be to keep on top of these storm activities. Major events look like they're about to occur here with 10W and with Tropical Storm Infa.
Yeah, so finally, I'll here to summarize the current warnings. So blue typhoon warnings in effect over Zhuhai, China, and standby signal number 1 is in force over Hong Kong and Macau, and it's expected to maintain in the morning. White typhoon warning in effect in the coastal eastern Guangdong and western Guangdong, and mainly it is blue typhoon warning over Zhuhai, China right now.
Thank you, Kenneth, and thanks to everyone for taking part on tonight's stream, in our team here, who have done excellently as usual, and for the viewers for taking part, and of course getting your questions heard. We'll be back again tomorrow morning, my time that is. Time zones all over the place. In China it would be 7 p.m, 8 p.m. in Japan. That would be 11 a.m. UTC. So on the US East Coast it's bright and early at 7 a.m. That's when our next stream will be. Stay tuned for that and for our automated stream. In the meantime, have a good night, and let's keep tracking these storms. It could be a long few days. Thanks for watching.